and I made the choice to focus on music because I was like, someone actually cares enough to put, $1,000 behind my record.
Welcome to the DIY Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Nico Santana. This is brought to you by DistroKid. Get 7% off your yearly membership plan, distrokid.com/VIP/Nico Santana. Welcome, everybody, to the DIY Artist Podcast. My name is Nico. I have a special guest with me today. Of course, every guest is special, but this just happens to be a good friend of mine. He goes by DGH. He has been an independent musician, artist, band member. I mean, he's done it all, and he'll tell you the story. So I'm just happy to have him on the podcast today. And DGH, welcome, man.
Oh, dude, thank you for having me. Congratulations on your inaugural season, and I'm happy to be number 2. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. No, I'm honored because this guest has. We've worked on music together. We have one of my favorite records that I've ever been a part of to date. It's called Dream Big. You can actually stream it on Spotify, Apple Music, and all your favorite platforms, of course, DSPs. But more importantly, we just like to build each other up as artists. We talk about life. We talk about everything in between. Very supportive, and he's been doing this music thing way longer than I have. But at the same time, we're very like-minded in many regards. So before I get started with this episode, I just want to give a huge shout out to DistroKid. DistroKid is and should be your one and only one-stop shop for all distribution needs for your music. Get 7% off your first year's annual membership plan using my VIP link, distrokid.com/VIP/Nico Santana. One of my favorite features of DistroKid is promo cards. So if you didn't already know, as a member, included in your membership plan, you have access to what's called promo cards, and basically it enables you to have vertical aspect ratio promotional flyers, if you will, that you could pop into Instagram stories or TikTok with your cover art for any of the releases that you've released through DistroKid. So check that out, distrokid.com/VIP/Nico Santana. All right, DGH. So first off, man, I just want to ask you, how did you get started in music? When was the first time you picked up an instrument?
Oh boy, probably similar to a lot of people. I started in church. I grew up in a very small town, and my parents took us to church when I was a kid, and so I grew up going to a Lutheran church, which is very dark and the music is really challenging, and I even now, like, I can't read music or anything like that. Probably would have served me when I was a kid if I had learned it, especially to try and sing those hymns. But so I grew up trying to sing along, how to sing in church, that stuff, and then got into choir when I was in high school and did I think it's called madrigal. Also, I think they were kind of like religious, old-timey religious songs in the choir that I was in. Didn't quite make it into show choir. That's fine. I blame Round Valley High School teacher Bill Weiser for denying me my Tony. That's fine. But I was singing, good and bad, mostly bad, I'm sure, and then picked up a guitar my senior year in high school, a little bit late. And I think a coworker or something gave me one, and I took a couple lessons from a gal through our church. Who was actually like kind of young, not like an old gal. Mm-hmm. So she knew like her favorite band was Social Distortion, and I thought that was so cool. And I don't really know them, but I brought her this like Alice in Chains album. I was like, this sounds really cool. I want to learn how to play these songs. And the same with I brought her like a Neil Young album. I say I brought her all these things, but I think we really only hung out for like a week or two, because I quickly learned that I had no interest in guitar lessons. So I just started like playing along to stuff, like playing along to Green Day and Alice in Chains, and trying to figure stuff out.
That's dope, man. That's dope. So
the first guitar I had, like the strings were like a mile off the fretboard.
Yeah.
And which was horrible then, but now I look at it and I go, yeah, I'm kind of glad that I had that experience where like it's really challenging to learn a thing, but I still did it, and now playing guitar is easier because I had that like painful experience.
Yeah.
Painful.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's funny you say that. I started out in choir, but not church choir. I mean, I grew up going to church as well, and for me, like my first experience with choir practice was actually at my elementary school. I was telling my wife Anita this the other day. It's funny because I think it was fourth grade. There's just a lot of parallels between your story and mine, so this is why I'm sharing it. But in fourth grade, there was like a choir tryout after school, and I went because I just liked music, so I ended up going. And I remember these two guys we had to try out for choir, believe it or not. It was elementary school. There wasn't much of a standard there. I mean, I don't think they were like telling us like, no, you suck, you can't be part of the choir. I think as long as you tried, like that's all that mattered, right?
Yeah.
So these two guys come up. I remember their names, Jared and Kevin. They come up.
Those guys.
Jared and
Kevin. JK.
Yep, JK.
Come on.
And they sang Miss Jackson by Outkast, right? Together.
Wow.
I remember that vividly, and that was kind of like one of my first memories in, with music or whatever. And then, of course, we choir practice, fourth grade. I think it was third and fourth grade. But then, similar to you, man, I picked up a guitar. I think it was like one of those Walmart kiddie guitars at the time, and I really wanted to learn it, but, that guitar didn't last very long. So my parents ended up finding a local guitar shop nearby. And I think in fifth grade, I was around 8, maybe 9. I started getting lessons from this guy who was just really cool, super chill dude. Was probably like 6'1", maybe he was like 5'10", but I was so small he looked like 6'5", something. I don't know. But he taught me all these like I want to say old school, but they weren't really old school. Just a lot of old classical guitar, classical rock kind of, and then some newer like punk stuff. And even though I wasn't really into that genre of music, I was more like hip hop minded and R&B. That's what I liked. Like he showed me a new world, right? He showed me everything that he listened to, and he was part of some local band. But anyways, man, that's how I started too, the guitar and choir. So it's funny you bring that up. Now, how was your transition from, picking up the guitar senior year? I know you mentioned that you didn't learn to read music, but I mean, you're at least in my eyes, you're a phenomenal guitar player.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know you were in bands or a band. What was, I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And thank you. My real kind of education through to learn how to play guitar was, playing along to things that I liked. Like I mentioned, like an Alice in Chains record or whatever. But I grew up in a small town in Arizona, and the day I graduated, I moved to Phoenix, which to me was the big city, and started going to shows, and was like, man, that's a thing that I would love to do. And so some other kind of nerdy friends and I started a band, and we were called Kendrick, which was I know, very weird. It was a street in a town called Flagstaff, Arizona, and I took a picture of this like in black and white a long time ago, and the street sign of the name, and I thought that was cool, and I was like, oh, I should like do a band or something. So that when we were looking for names, that was the first one that jumped out, and we stuck with it. And I played bass in that band because we were a tight 3-piece. We were a sloppy 3-piece, but my buddy Brian was playing guitar, so I played bass and screamed. And that was really my first, experience being in a room making music from my body that was, something that I helped create. I think.
Wow.
That wasn't like a hymn or me just trying to figure out like a Jimmy Eat World song or a Green Day song or something. And that was really fun. We sucked. We practiced in the basement of my the place I worked at that time. And then around that time, I think I was starting to like make plans to move to Phoenix or to move to Seattle. So I moved to Seattle in '99, and then really kind of got serious about all of it.
Yeah.
Because Phoenix was a bit of a hard place to be as an artist.
I'm sure.
You know, bands like Jimmy Eat World and some other, you know, bands got big,
Excuse me.
and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, as like an independent person that didn't have major labels coming to your shows, I wanted to try something different, and so came to Seattle, and that was '99, and then recorded my first record in 2001.
That's
I feel
crazy.
like that was a long-winded answer.
No. This is perfect.
There we are.
I like that. I'm a story guy, right? And as I mentioned to you, like I grew up on hip hop, and one of the things that I really loved about hip hop was just listening to people's stories of how they got to where they were. And I mean, I have the Nas album right there, Illmatic, and seeing this young kid from the projects make it from there to where he is now. If I'm not mistaken, he's like a venture capitalist investing in like cryptocurrency platforms like Coinbase and whatnot, making crazy amounts of money. But that's not the point. The point is that the story, the come up, is to me the most interesting part. And listening to your story, while I've listened to it before from a different perspective, or maybe in a new setting, or this conversation is super helpful for me. And I know it is for a lot of people out there that are listening to these types of podcasts. So you mentioned that Kendrick was your first band and you were playing the bass. You mentioned Phoenix was not necessarily the place where you wanted to be, or at least be discovered, if that was the route that you wanted to take. So what was so attractive about Seattle? What pulled you into that scene? And also with that question, what was the music scene like there as compared to, you know, Phoenix? How was that dichotomy?
And this is going to be such an old guy story. I'm 45. You know, I grew up on grunge. You know, that to me, grunge happened right at the perfect moment.
Yeah.
You know, I was in high school in 90 to 94. And so I loved the movie Singles, and I still do. It's like one of the first Cameron Crowe movies, and it takes place in Seattle, and it has a bunch of dudes from like different bands and stuff. And as I wanted to go visit Seattle. So in '97, my sister and I, you know, took a weekend trip and went to Seattle, walked around, got tattooed. She did. I didn't, which is funny. And just kind of wandered and realized, man, the climate here is really nice. Like, you know, the hills kind of suck, but you know, there's music happening, and we were literally here for like 3 days. I came back to Seattle, or came back to Phoenix, and then kind of over the next 18 months, kind of set my sights on it. I was like, all right, I got to get out of Phoenix, and I'm going to move to Seattle. So my roommate and dude I grew up with at the time was like, cool, let's go. I want to go too. And then another like friends from Phoenix, who I'm still really close friends with, was moving to Seattle at the same time. So I had this like mini kind of community already. But music in Seattle obviously had transitioned out of grunge,
right,
and was heavily into like indie. So like an actual moment I remember was one of my first or second year living here. I went to a local show at a place called the Break Room, which is now called Chop Suey, a beautiful venue here that I've played a few times. And it was Death Cab for Cutie and Pedro the Lion. And we're talking like a, I don't know, 200 to 300 capacity room. And those are both massive artists now. And so Nate Mendel, who is not in the Foo Fighters yet, but was in Sunny Day Real Estate, one of my favorite bands ever, was like standing at the bar, and I kind of had this super terrible that I'm ashamed of fanboy moment where I went up and talked to him, and I was like, oh my God, I love, you know, Sunny Day Real Estate. And he was like, thanks a lot, whatever, and then wandered off. But it was, to me, that moment is a moment that I remember as kind of solidifying me being here.
Wow.
I was like, it's a Tuesday. I'm going to see Death Cab and Pedro the Lion, and I just annoyed Nate Mendel. I feel like I can fit in. And so there it was. And then I'd always kind of written some songs in my bedroom, and started going to more and more shows. I lived in downtown Seattle, so I could walk to shows every night. And there was a songwriter that I really still do, named Greg Markle. He makes guitar pedals and modular synth gear now, but at that time he was focusing on songwriting and being a producer. And I bugged him. I was, hey, I have a few songs. I'd love to record them with you. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So, and that was literally 2 weeks after September 11th when I recorded my first record, of 2001.
Wow.
And I remember just going, and at the time his studio was in the basement of his house, and we spent like 2 days. My roommate, my dude that I also moved to Seattle with, came and played guitar on it, some guitar, and sang backup, and we cranked out 5 songs in 2 days. And then Greg asked to put it out on his label, which was small at the time, but for me it was like a kind of a catalyst of like, am I gonna focus on music, or am I just gonna like screw around?
Yeah.
And I made the choice to focus on music, because I was like, someone actually cares enough to put $1,000 behind my record and press CDs or something, at that time.
Yeah.
Anyway, that got a little sidetracked, but that's kind of my story of like how I got to Seattle and how I kind of got involved in wanting to make music and do things.
Huge, man. No, thank you for sharing. And again, just pulling from your story and kind of paralleling it to mine, just to see the contrasting worlds. Like, you're in high school in the early 90s, and not to put anyone above anyone or to shame or make anyone feel different. Like, it doesn't matter what age bracket you are. I was born in the 90s, right? And at the same time like, there are so many parallels. Like, the story can repeat itself over and over again, and I think that's kind of the thing that I'm trying to carry out with this podcast is, here's the thing. It may not be a unique story, you trying to pursue music, not you, DGH, but like people in general. And there are nuggets of wisdom that we can pull from each people or each person's story and apply to our own, and not to cut corners, but maybe expedite or kind of, I don't know, make the process a little bit easier or faster or whatever it is, and hopefully give you a shot to do what it is that you want to do. And in my world at the time, when I thought I had a shot at music, which again still might have, I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but moving.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, when did you kind of, transition out of 6th grade choir into I want to do stuff on my own?
Yeah, well, I'll get into that in a moment, but one of the things that I wanted to highlight was the moving aspect and just kind of that new environment and introducing myself to a new environment. So I grew up in full circle here. I grew up in this small town. I was born in Colombia, moved to the States when I was 7 years old. So pretty traumatic experience, but I'll get into that some other time. But when I moved to the United States, we moved with my grandma, who at the time, my mom's mom, was living in this small suburb of like Palm Beach, Florida, called Jupiter. And sounds weird, I know, but it's a small little town, the town of Jupiter, believe it or not. Burt Reynolds is sheriff of Jupiter, Florida. He actually used to live there. Met him once.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. was, yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I grew up there, and as one of the few Hispanic kids in my school, always felt kind of like an outcast. I mean, totally. Not only was I below everyone's income level as far as the manner in which I grew up, because everybody else was well off to do, at least in the school that I went to, which was in a nicer part of town. But I also looked the way I looked. I spoke the way I spoke, which at the time was more of a Spanish accent than I have now, if I have any.
But you were speaking English at
I was
that
speaking
time?
English, yeah. Apparently I learned it in like 3 months, but I mean, that's kind of...
Kids, they absorb stuff, I guess.
So moving out of that environment, coming to Tampa, Florida, where I am now currently, and just experiencing kind of like a different world fueled me in my pursuit of music as well. I grew up on hip hop because that was the one thing that I could relate to, like the underdog, the person that made it out, and a lot of the stories that I heard from people growing up in the hood were stories that I could relate to, at least from Colombia, from my experiences in Colombia. And so, yeah, moving to Tampa, at least, even though, we're a generation apart, perhaps not even, it was similar experience, like you going to Seattle. Like for me, it was like, I went to a studio where like DJ Khaled recorded one of his hit singles. I don't remember which one, and I recorded like.
Is that the one where he goes, "Yeah"?
I think it was
DJ Khaled.
Yeah, I think it was one of those. I think it was All I Do Is Win. I could be wrong, but it had like everybody and their mom on it. But that's not saying a lot.
I feel like his job. I don't even know what he does. He shows up and says, DJ Khaled.
It's
and then
that
it's like
meme,
featuring
man.
DJ Khaled.
It's that
but
meme.
I know he like makes beats and stuff. But
no,
like,
but he doesn't, right? He doesn't. Apparently he doesn't, because he's just like the guy that, you know, pulls the strings or whatever. That's a nice beat you got there. Can I yell my name on it?
That's like an executive producer role, not a producer role.
Exactly.
But at least he gets that feature for saying, yo,
dude,
DJ Khaled.
Making that money, man. He's doing well for himself.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, dude. No, but the way that I got it, so going back to your question, the way that I got from 6th grade to one of my buddies, like he's killing it. He's a Microsoft now account executive. I won't say his name, but not because I don't want to give him credit. I don't want to put him on blast in case or event he doesn't want people to know. But he had torrented at the time a MP3 mixer program, and I remember I was at his house. We were in high school, so I again, guitar lessons from like 5th grade to like 9th grade, I think it was. Didn't do much music stuff then. I'd listen to a bunch of, you know, hip hop, hardcore hip hop, thinking I was like some thug from South Florida, but I really wasn't. Like I said, grew up going to church, you know, singing choir, whatever. And anyways, so yeah, like he got me this MP3 mixer, man, and we just started rapping like the most obnoxious, vulgar, like just stupid stuff, like, you know, little high schoolers do, whatever. And
can I ask what that program was called?
I think it was called MP3 Mixer. I think that's what it was called.
That's what it was called.
I'm pretty sure it was called MP3 Mixer. I could be wrong.
It's so funny because I got like a hacked version of this thing in like 2000 called Sound Edit, and it was just like a 1-track recorder, and it had a dog, like, as you know, like the Clippy, that's what it was. But like the Clippy was a little dog.
Oh yeah, I
and he would
that.
like give you little tips, and all it would do was record 1 track.
Okay.
So I would just like, that's how I learned how to play guitar and sing at the same time.
No way.
Because I was like, well, I can't multi-track.
Right.
Like my brain knew what it was back then, but so I just have to like learn how to do it at the same time if I want to remember this idea.
Yeah.
So I just like got good at that, and that's how I did it. A thing I struggled with. But anyway, it's funny that we both were like, well, we stole some crap off the internet.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that how everybody starts making music? Like, I feel like everybody has that story.
Yeah.
Like some hacked, you know, DAW, not even a DAW. I mean, this is like 2-track thing for me. It was. I think that's what it was. Like you could stack 2 tracks.
You had 2 tracks?
Yeah. Yep. That's why it was called MP3 Mixer. Yep. It was MP3 Mixer. Yep.
They called this one Sound Edit, but there was no editing. Like I could take the sound of like no sound off the front and the back. That was like the only edit. Like I could crop it, but I'm not going to be able to chop it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And
sorry.
no, man, and I think this is cool because here's the thing. Like I think a lot of us, and myself included, to this day, I think that, you know, I need all this crazy equipment to sound good. And sure, you might need quality equipment eventually to get to a place where you could present your product and it be professional. But to start out, I mean, you really don't need much. And for you, it was the Sound Edit program. For me, it was MP3 Mixer. And just like you were practicing your songs and songwriting with, you know, with a Sound Edit, for me, I was practicing like how to rap. Like that was what I wanted to do, even though I had the guitar as kind of like my first love and introduction to music. And I learned how to read music, but honestly, like it got to a point where my interest just dipped because it felt a little forced with the weekly lessons. Oof, that I kind of just.
Do you still remember how now?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, and eventually I went back to sing in choir and stuff like that, and I kind of just remembered some of it, but not enough to like keep up with like musicians, quote unquote, that actually know how to. So, but yeah, I would come back after school because I went to it was called a magnet school at the time. I'm sure they still have them around, but it was a school that was purposefully put in the projects, but for higher, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like not for students that did well in school, that they had magnet programs so that you could like excel and potentially do like dual enrollment and all that other stuff. But that's besides the point. The point was that because my school was so far away and I was kind of in the hood, I felt like, this is kind of my chance to be a part of this world that I've always wanted to be a part of, that I've always related to more than the world that I'm in right now. So I would go back to, back home. I didn't have a lot of friends since they all lived like an hour apart. And I would just turn on this MP3 mixer, jack some beat from the internet, probably like an instrumental, and just start rapping every day for like, probably like at least a year or two straight. And
so were you like freestyling? Or were you going like through, all right, I'm going to hit record and open my notebook?
Both. At first it was freestyled. So we just punch and play or punch and record or whatever. But then I wanted to get really intricate with the lyrics. I started studying like guys like, I don't even know if he's around or if people know about him. Papoose, obviously you guys know Fabulous. I think, well, not obviously, but he's a little bit more recognizable than Papoose was. All these New York rappers. I started getting into like the New York hip hop scene because at the time all I listened to was like trap music, right? So like Young Jeezy and T.I. and Ludacris, like all these guys that were just like super like dirty South, and it felt like my brain was slowly withering away a little bit, but at the same time, some of them had like really good stories. It's just some of the stuff that was playing on the radio just wasn't all that for me. And then eventually I got into like some of these New York rappers, and I related to New York rappers because Colombia, Bogota, at least the way where I was from was more closely aligned to like New York City than some of the southern rappers or whatever. But yeah, I started learning like rhyme structures and how they rhyming patterns and structures and how they use metaphors and double entendres, and I really like the poetry of rap. And then I started listening to like Mos Def and Talib Kweli and Common and all these guys that were a little bit more just different, you know what I mean? And then I started getting into like more underground rap, and that's the course that I went. But that was all through high school. So I mean there's just way more detail than that. But going back to what you were saying, you went from grunge to a little bit more indie stuff. Like for me, it was like mainstream dirty South rap, the stuff that was around me in my environment, to now moving further into studying some of the older, guys in the game, like Notorious B.I.G. and some of the East Coast guys, to eventually like some more of like the underground rap that true hip hop heads would say that, were like really were really in it for the love of the music. So now you're in Seattle, and are you pursuing a record deal at this time, or what's your MO?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
But one thing I want to jump back on, which I think would be an interesting thing to chat about, is, I've always been really terrible at like paying attention to lyrics or I feel writing lyrics. Mm-hmm. I've always been more focused on the music behind it and the vocal melody. So that's the thing I lock onto.
Ooh.
But I love hip hop.
Yes.
And there are certain records that I've listened to 1,000 times where if I tried to like quote unquote rap along, which was a thing, like at the same time of listening to grunge, I was listening to equal amounts hip hop. Like it was like Pearl Jam and Tribe Called Quest. Like That was the whole world for me. And so, but I could never latch on to the lyrical content. And I think it's fascinating you going like, well, I'm going to listen to, the first Nas record. And to me, like lyrically, that's really like, there's a lot of depth to it. I know that's a thing, but in my world or where my brain is, I was never like, oh, lyrically, I understand this. Mm-hmm. Or, maybe that's because I'm like a white guy that doesn't live in New York. But I also never, even through like listening to Pearl Jam, didn't latch onto it. And
Gotcha.
So I like the flow, and there's a lot of melody in hip hop, which a lot of people don't understand. You know, people will be like, well, all rappers do is talk. Mm-mm. Like, no, it's not. Rapping is basically a shorter version of singing.
Yeah.
Like if someone's rapping out of key,
You're right.
You know?
You
And
said
so
it.
I love that melody and I love the rhythm of it. And that's the thing that I always was attracted to. And I love hearing a different perspective from you going like, well, I really resonated with, or the lyrics side really resonated with me. I just think it's cool, like how people listen to things differently. You know?
Yeah. There was an interview recently that I listened to. It was Tyler, the Creator, and he was talking about how people digest music differently, right? And to your point, you know, my frame of reference came from lyrics, whereas somebody like you would dissect the music and the musicality behind a record. And as I grew older and as I began learning more about instrumentation and actually like sitting down with musicians and learning like different roles, right? And even working at a studio for a short bit of time and learning how to like mic a drum set versus like a vocalist versus any other instrument, like it helped me to bring it full circle. And whereas when I first started, I was trying to fit as many words as I could on a track or a record. As I evolved, eventually I started paying attention more to how it melded with the song and the production behind it and the cadences. And then I started studying people like Notorious B.I.G., who, from what I understand, again, obviously I never met him in person, but he would listen more to R&B than hip hop. And one of his things was, you know, his cadence, right? B-I-G, P-O-P-P-A, right? And it sounded like more like a jazz player over a track, like rapping, than it did, you know, somebody who had no concept of music. To your point, yes, I mean, hip hop is very musically, gosh, I mean, obviously the verse that's an understatement, but there, it pulls apart from so many different genres in so many different ways. Even now it continues to evolve with the use of autotune and how different people implement that. So yeah, and no, thank you for that, man. Yeah, I grew to love hip hop because of the lyrics and the lyricality of it. To be able to tell my own story and to feel like I could express myself as somebody who lacked that platform before, as somebody who didn't have that growing up, and then I felt like I could be heard finally, you know what I mean? But as time goes on and you process things as an adult, you learn about yourself, you figure out like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Oh, I'm just trying to cope with the world around me and blah. And then eventually to grow to really appreciate every facet and aspect of the music. So, and by the way, my question for you, as far as pursuing a record deal, wasn't, and I don't know if you answered it for the here and now, but more so when you first moved to Seattle, was that your MO then?
Yeah, I actually, back then I think it was.
Okay.
I sent my CD to venues that I wanted to play at, to record labels that I wanted to be on. A few venues got back to me, and when I was able to kind of book a tour around that, which was nice. But it wasn't until my second record came out. The first one was called Failures in Motion. It came out in 2001, and then I recorded, that was a 5-song EP. Then I recorded The Lake Effect in 2004, and that came out that same year.
And that was just DGH, or was that with Kendrick?
That was just my name, Daniel G Harmann.
Okay.
Yeah. Kendrick was, we never recorded or anything. So when I came to Seattle, I was like, what's my artist name going to be? And I was like, well, I kind of like my name, and I'll add the initial.
It's fire.
So thanks. It's fire if you're a classical piano player or something. So I kind of quote unquote shopped the rough mixes of The Lake Effect, and a label out of Chicago picked it up. And I was very lucky, but also unlucky, because they definitely sold me like a bill of goods. And we're like, we're going to take you on tour. And then nothing really ever happened. They did pay for CD distribution, replication, distribution. They paid to master it and mix it, which was all nice. But I wasn't trying to get anything out of it, which is good, because I certainly didn't.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to like maybe get hooked up with a booking agent and go play shows,
Yeah.
That a little bit of that happened, but it was still pretty regional, and a lot of like locals, Seattle stuff, and also West Coast. But yeah, at that point I was like, well, I guess I understand why people don't like record labels. They seem to be dying anyway, so who cares?
Sure.
that was like 2004 to 2006 when I really worked that record. And then by 2007, I was like, well, I'm just going to press my own.
Smart, man. And so, you know, I asked this because at least for myself, speaking for myself, not the entire hip hop community, which I am by no means a representative of, but I saw hip hop as a means to get to a place where I could find, you know, in simple terms, freedom, right? Financial freedom, success, the things that my parents came here for. So for me, it seemed to be that finding a record deal who could sign you was like your key to freedom. And, you know, I don't know if that's the perspective that's shared with all musicians around the world. It sounded like, you know, you had a little bit of that behind you, although you weren't looking to get something out of it per se, aside from playing shows and whatnot. So talk to me a little bit about your situation moving to Seattle. Were you working a full-time job? What was that like in order to not feel that like financial desperation in certain ways, and maybe even like dig into that record deal or record situation further, or perhaps land yourself a even worse situation? I mean, that's something that I feel like a lot of independent artists face.
For sure. I was working full-time. I worked at hotels even when I lived in Arizona, and then I moved when I moved to Seattle, I landed in a couple different hotels, and all through that time was still doing music. And they were all very supportive. And I think I actually ended up quitting and being like, I'm just going to work a dumb job and focus on music. And that was like 2002, which I did. And then I moved to Portland and landed back in a hotel, worked in hotels while still working on music, came back to Seattle, and then got hired at like a cooking school. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to do the thing that my parents always thought I should do, which is what my dad did, which was become an electrician. Okay. So I did that. I went also while recording records and playing shows.
Wow.
I went to school for 5 years and worked as an electrician for 8, getting up at 4 a.m, sometimes not sleeping, you know, just still being a little drunk and rolling into work, or, you know, into class at 6 or 7 a.m.
Wow.
And quickly realized, you know, after 8 years of doing it, because you kind of, once you start, you kind of have to stick with it, that I didn't want to be involved in it anymore, mostly because of just the bigotry and homophobia and sexism and racism that kind of, you know, comes with a lot of people that are in that trade, just construction trade in general. Not everyone. I made a lot of great friends that I'm still friends with through that, but I just realized it wasn't my scene. Luckily, quote unquote, I got laid off around that same time and realized I wasn't going to go back. So I started doing some remote work and for different companies, different like little startups here and there, and realized that was more my vibe because I could work from home and still work on music. And that's still what I do. I, you know, work for a music distributor, which works fine and for what I like to do in life, which is play music. So awesome. I'm very lucky, but it took a long time.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, you know, your journey, because I think for a lot of us, for me especially, I thought I didn't make it until I can make music a full-time thing. And fact of the matter is, like, even I was thinking about this the other day, even artists, like the most successful artists, still have a job. And what I mean by that is, I was listening to an A$AP Rocky interview today, where he was talking about Frank Ocean and how he finessed himself out of like $20 million with a record deal or something to that effect. But one of the things that he shared was that he had gotten some sort of sponsorship or some sort of deal with, I think it was Apple Music at the time, and then A$AP, it might have been A$AP, yeah, it was A$AP Rocky. Got inspired out of that situation to get a sponsorship with Mercedes and kind of do things his way. And, you know, obviously you have different artists coming out with clothing lines and not just merch lines, but like actual legitimate like clothing lines and makeup lines and all that stuff. All that to say that while music is certainly a passion for a lot of us, it may not necessarily be the case where you've made it means that you're working on music all the time. And I think that I kind of came to that junction when I was, not too long ago, 27, where I realized like, okay, I can't make music my full-time thing. I have responsibilities now, wife, married, got kids, mortgage, all the fun stuff that comes with adulting, of course. And music is just not paying the bills. Although I worked for a recording studio for some time, I was still working for other people and clients. And so even though I was kind of like in the mix, right, I was working in a recording studio, I wasn't making barely any money, number one. And number two, music all the time. Now I'm at a sweet spot where, similar to, DGH here, like I work from home, I have flexibility, I get a chance to do what it is that I like to do, in the sense of course, with, taking care of all my work items on a day-to-day basis. But before and after work, during lunch break, during some downtime, I can hop on Logic and pop something out real quick. Like, that's life for, 99.9% of musicians, if not all of us, to a degree, right?
100%. Yeah.
I don't think there's a place to make it to. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there unless you're Drake, I guess? I don't know.
Well, I think that, dudes like Drake are very fortunate. And he started young and was able to maintain that, and in not just in touring, right? I think when I think about like where I wouldn't want to be is where I thought I would wanted to be 10 or 20 years ago, which is someone that is a touring musician. Yeah. Then all of a sudden no one gives a crap about you. And you then have to do a job that you would never imagine that you would have to do, right? Because your skill set that you've spent the last 10 to 20 years is awesome, but it's not practical in the real world, Yep. So that would be heartbreaking to me. That's why you see a lot of old bands, old punk bands or whatever, going back on the road, because that is their income. That's why they're doing live streams. That's why they're trying to keep it up, because they don't want to, I'm assuming, get a job at Walmart.
Yeah. It after you're on stage with people singing your songs, even if they're not singing your songs, and you're just at a festival that you somehow managed to pull, and you're singing in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people, like going to a job that, although it's dignified work, definitely don't want to underestimate the labor force that's there. Yeah. It is very heartbreaking. And I think I wanted to touch on something, because you and I have talked about it offline, and I don't think it's discussed too much, especially not maybe now more than before in the hip hop community. It's just this whole notion of mental health, and how being on the road all the time, especially like partying and all that stuff. And again, not knocking anyone for doing that. I've had my fair share of fun, but I think the lifestyle in and of itself, touring all the time, not having kind of like your roots, is just it can get very overwhelming, especially if you're a little bit more prone to mental health issues and whatnot. I don't know about you, man, but like for me, the times that I've gone off tour, or the times that I've gotten off concerts or being in front of the stage, and I found myself trying to chase that high again. And so I can only imagine if you're playing for so long, and then after a while the show stops, the income stops, like what are you looking forward to now? I feel like I have a lot to look forward to, because I didn't get lucky, and I didn't get to experience all that craziness that comes with like actually like touring as a full-time musician. Is that kind of where your headspace is at as well? Or do you wish you toured more? What are your thoughts on all that?
No, I think, and thank you for asking. I think early on, in the early to mid 2000s, I was very focused on trying to get a booking agent versus like a record label. Okay. I wanted someone to put me on the road, for extended periods of time. I wanted to go on tour with bigger bands instead of just playing local shows. But then I started to realize kind of the beauty in playing these local shows was that like I'm doing a thing that a lot of people really strive to do. So had to kind of, check myself a little bit. Where I'm at now, I have zero interest literally of even like playing a show, let alone going on tour. I'm happy in my life. I'm happy. I'm married. I have, animal children that I love. And I like creating music. And I think one thing that's really challenging for me mentally is going from, and I'll go back to why I don't really want to play shows, but going from a person who's a songwriter who writes songs that, whether you tell yourself this is happening or not, it doesn't matter because it's happening. You write songs in a way that you hear them fully formed as how I'm going to perform them on stage or how they're going to sound on a record. But ultimately, how am I going to figure this out to play in front of people? So that's always the thing. It's like, can I play this guitar part while I'm singing? Can I, what's going to happen here if I'm on stage? Having that not even be a thing anymore is very weird, but also kind of liberating in the sense of like, all right, like you asked me to play, you want me to sing and play on your song? You asked me to sing and play keyboards on your hip hop or R&B song. I would love to do that.
Oh, yeah.
With zero, like, thought of like, we'll ever play this live. And if that ever happened, I would spend a day trying to relearn all of that crap. Right. But like now I can just be like, yeah, let's do it. Instead of having to like overthink it, which is what I would always do of like, how am I ever going to reproduce this?
Damn. Yeah.
So now we live in a time where like everyone's sharing and collaborating, which is, to me, it's awesome. Like, it's, things suck in a lot of ways, but in that spirit, things are way better than they've ever been. You and I are on different coasts, 3-hour time zone, and we're talking in real time.
Yeah.
You literally saw the sun go down behind me and how dark it got in here. Like, that is amazing to me.
Yeah.
And so we have to embrace these things that we can use as tools instead of sweating like, well, I guess I'm not going to play at the Sunset, ever again. I don't care about that stuff. And back into why I don't care about that. The only joy that I ever got from playing live shows was literally the 15 to 35 minutes that I was on the stage.
Wow.
My wife called it perfectly. She called it pre-show Dan. And it was like from, 7 a.m. to 7 or 9 p.m. the day of a show, I was a piece of shit. Like, she did not want to deal with me. She didn't want to be around me just because I was in my head.
Right.
I was stressing not about like how I'm going to perform, but like who's going to come to the show? Are people going to come to the show?
Right.
Will I be able to hear myself in the monitors? Is my amp going to work tonight? All of these mini things that are out of our control that I was just focused on that would ruin the day for me when I should be like, I'm having fun. I'm playing a show in front of people. Being on tour is awesome because you allow yourself to be like, this is my life for a week. This is my life for 2 weeks. And I'm with homies that like get it. That's their life too. So we're going to talk and we're going to have fun in the van or whatever, and then go and play a show. Real world doesn't exist in that world. Right.
Yep. You said it.
So I had fun doing that. That was a great time in my life, but I'm not interested in booking a West Coast tour and playing to no one ever again.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I had no idea. So yeah, I get show jitters as well. I don't think mine turned me into pre-show Nico, but but that's the thing is they go as soon as I get in front of the mic and it is time to go. I have no jitters.
Yeah. It's just like, it's all the crap leading up to it.
No, that makes total sense. I think for me, just the notion of pulling away from reality, and I'm glad you said that, and we'll leave it at this last kind of bit here, segment, if you will. I think that now you can sort of make your own reality with the tools that we have available to us today. Like you said, between Zoom calls and collaborating with people coast to coast. And I mean, you and I have gotten on a song that was produced by a homie who is in South Florida, who, produced the beat without knowing that a year later, my homie from Seattle is going to play guitar on it and sing vocals, and we do a bilingual Spanish English rap song or whatever. All that said,
who I may never meet.
yeah, right. And I look at his life and I say, 10 years ago I would have loved to be in his shoes, but because he's a full-time artist and producer, but unfortunately with the pandemic, a lot of the stuff that a lot of his income streams kind of dwindled into, as far as I'm not speaking into him specifically, but a lot of the touring artists were not able to do what they did for revenue and for income. And I was fortunate that I wasn't in that position, and I was still able to experiment like you are able to experiment now without having to necessarily focus on how will this play out in a show. Same thing for me. I'm not really focused on whether or not people like it enough to book me for shows, but that I enjoy making it and music that I enjoy making as well. And there's no intention of trying to get signed like 3 or 4 years ago, where I really was just trying to make commercial music that the gatekeepers would like, right? And I mean, that was just sucking the soul out of me. So all that said,
well, another thing to realize too about the people that do have the opportunity, and are hashtag blessed to do it full time, they're working on a lot of stuff they don't want to work on.
Oh, yep. I've seen posts where same dude just I mean, without getting too much into the nitty gritty, like, I think he said the other day, like, no more commercial pop songs. This is, this one's for the real fans or something like that. I was like, yeah, okay, I get it, man. I get it.
Totally. Yeah. I have several friends who are full-time studio engineers and producers, and they're, 80% of their income is like modern country and like modern, like mom's Christian music. Yeah. People going, like moms going in to like record their Christian album.
Right.
And they're like, I enjoy the paycheck and I am able to express myself a little bit here and there, right. But that wasn't how they envisioned it happening.
Yeah.
Just because I can hit spacebar and Pro Tools, now I'm doing all this stuff that I don't want to work on.
And a good friend of mine said this, and he said that when he reached the job, or he got the job that he's currently in now, which happens to be in music, he thought he'd have it made, but it sucked the passion for music away. But that said, man, I think it's great, again, to bring it full circle from the beginning. Thank you to our sponsors, DistroKid, because as an independent artist, I get to control every facet of my music making, from who I want on the beat, who, if I can make the beat, I'll make it, the production, whether or not I want guitars and how to arrange that, of course, with the consent of the collaborator. But all that said, like, you can put your music out there nowadays with a click of a button, and of course, filling out a form the appropriate way, making sure that everything is filled out correctly. And millions of people have access to the apps, the DSPs that your music is now on. So it doesn't take a lot. I mean, the entry point, or the barrier to entry is lower in a sense, and at the same time you have to work your ass off in order to actually like get people to listen to it. But that's kind of the enjoyable part, and at least to me it is the puzzle piece, right? Trying to figure that out. And I mean, people
talk a lot of shit about like Spotify and stuff, but I think, to me as an artist, I go, well, I sold a CD at a show.
Yeah.
That is a one-time purchase.
Right.
But now I have hundreds, if not thousands, of people listening to my stuff every day, which not only is rad, but also is making me money every single day, instead of just that one-time $10 that I spent $9 on.
Dude, I mean, I'm pulling up our Spotify artist app, my Spotify artist app right now, and it just so happens to be that my top stream song for the week is "Dream Big" by Nico, Santana, and DGH, and the top countries that have streamed this song in the last 28 days: Mexico, Philippines, Guatemala, of course the US, and Brazil. Now, I've been to 4 to the 5 countries. I've never been to Guatemala, but even then I wouldn't carry CDs with me to every single one of these cities.
We didn't tour there.
Yeah, we didn't tour there. And so, to your point, DGH, man, like you said it, you have, not only is it where you can sell a CD back in the day when you would sell a CD to one person and that's it. Now you have access to people you would have never come across, because we've employed both our marketing strategy and, of course, the reach that Spotify has to be able to reach people like that. And so I think it's great, man. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people. Obviously, you have to be hungry. You have to have a passion for every facet of music making and music distribution in a sense, and music marketing to a degree. If you don't know, I mean, ask people. There's a lot of information out there for people to kind of consume and digest and implement.
Most of which is free.
And so I would encourage anybody who's a DIY artist like we are to kind of learn every facet of the music production and music marketing and music distribution processes, so that you can actually get your music in front of people and still do this while you have a full-time job, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going to class at 6. I mean, it doesn't really matter what situation you're in, as long as it makes you happy and it fulfills you in some way, shape, or form. Do it. Like, that's all that matters, right? Unless you disagree with that, DGH.
No, not at all. Not at all. Everyone, we live in an amazing time.
Yeah.
We live in a terrible time, but we also live in an amazing time where, as an artist, you can do whatever you want.
Facts.
And for very little amount of money, it's easy to learn how to do things. It's easy to learn how to, most computers now come with audio recording gear on them, if you want to put a song out, you can record it tonight and have it on the internet tomorrow. So that is amazing. And I think people, are learning that, which is beautiful. Like, look at Lil Nas X. Lil Nas, not little. Lil Nas X.
Yeah.
I mean, dude bought a track off BeatStars.
Yeah.
And like rapped over it, and here we are.
Yeah.
Do that 20 years ago.
It's crazy. Yeah. No. People getting discovered left and right off TikTok and SoundCloud and all that stuff. So it's cool, man. There's opportunity out there for sure. But even the 1% or the 99.9% of us, like, it's at the end of the day, if making music is something that gives you life and joy and whatever, like, gives you another reason to live or breathe or be, like, do it. You know what I mean? So, So with that said, guys, I want to leave it here because we've had a lot of great conversation with the man, the myth, the legend, Daniel G Harmann. Check him out on Spotify, all your DSPs, of course. We have a record out called Dream Big. Again, one of my favorite records. I think it's inspirational in my personal opinion, but it's telling you to dream big. So don't forget to do that. Follow him on Daniel G Harmann on Spotify. I know you're not that active on YouTube, but you have a YouTube channel, so I'll plug it in here as well.
Thank you.
Where you distribute your music as well. And as far as I go, man, like I said, I make music too. So if you guys want to follow me on Spotify, go ahead. I would more so appreciate a subscribe, or smashing the subscribe button and the like button and sharing this with friends or co-workers, whoever it is that makes music, perhaps somebody that that you haven't talked to in years. Please share it with them. We are trying to get this, kind of off the ground, if you will. So anything that you could do to help this motivate another DIY artist like ourselves would be greatly appreciated. And again, thank you to our sponsors, DistroKid. Again, you can save 7% off your first year's annual membership plan. Say that 10 times fast. And it's only $19.99.
You have.
Right.
I feel like you have.
And it's only $19.99 a year for the basic plan. So much love, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And
thank you, Nico, for having me on.
Dude,
I don't want you to end it without me saying thank you, because, man, I appreciate it.
No,
I
appreciate you. And we hope to see you on the podcast again, my friend. Hopefully this is not the first time, but not the last.
I'm coming back for season 2, y'all.
Yes, sir. So, all right, y'all.
Thanks so much, man. Talk soon.
Peace.